Skirptards, beware. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Sasquatch. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. This is episode 59 of Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are joined, as always, by our good friend and longhead, the Watcher, Mr. Brett England, from way out there in space.
Every week I get something new. Now I'm also a longhead. Like, I level up, like, progressively each new episode.
Yep. Well, I think you've been a longhead the whole time, but you know, I've had people tell me like, how can you trust him? He's a longhead. I'm like, hey, longheads know what they're talking about. So.
They are impartial beings of great cunning.
That's right.
They care about no one.
All right. So what do we got for news? We got news today.
Yeah.
I got some news. You got some news?
I got some news, but you should go first because
Okay. I can go first.
I don't want to talk about what you're about to talk about. And we need to talk about what I'm going to talk about.
Man, I'm just joking.
We have the same news.
Well, I have
Mars attacks.
Yes. Liquid water confirmed on Mars and alien life could be next. That's what my headline says. What does yours headline say?
Liquid water lake discovered on Mars.
Russ wins. It has aliens in it. It's actually, this is from mysteriousuniverse.org. So it says, we've come a long way since one of our ape-like ancestors first threw a bone into the sky and apparently got the idea to someday build a space station. One of our solar system's most enduring mysteries might have just been solved, or at least gotten a lot closer to being solved. According to a new study published in Science, Mars might indeed be home to a massive body of liquid water under its southern ice cap. If confirmed, this would mark the discovery of the largest known body of liquid water on Mars. Even better, the discovery has given the astronomical community a huge boost in our search for life on Mars. This groundbreaking discovery is based on a new analysis of radar data gathered by the MARSIS, that's MARSIS, Mars Advanced Radar for Subsurface and Ionosphere Sounding instrument, a low-frequency radar sensor aboard the European Space Agency's Mars Express spacecraft. The Mars Express has been in orbit around the red planet since December 2003 and spent 2012 to 2015 investigating the Planum Australe, I guess that's how you say it, Austral? I don't know. Planum Austral region of Mars' southern ice cap. So it's the southern ice cap. The radar profiles collected from that region indicate the presence of a lake of liquid water stretching 20 kilometers or 12 miles wide and over 1 meter in depth. Wow. Over 1 meter in depth, folks.
It's a puddle.
Do not dive here. No diving, no splashing.
They found a wading pool on Mars.
Roberto Orossi, a scientist at Italy's National Institute of Astrophysics who led the research, says these radar profiles are similar to those collected in studies of bodies of water hiding under ice caps here on Earth. So he says, the reflections from the bottom are stronger than surface reflection. This is something that, to us, is the telltale sign of the presence of water. This condition on Earth happens only when you observe subglacial water like in Antarctica. The radar data tell us that this water must contain a large amount of salts. This is because the ice above it is very transparent, and this would not be possible if the ice was too warm or too close to the melting point. So that's what I was thinking, too, when I was reading about this. Like, Mars is incredibly cold. The only way they can have liquid water there is if it's incredibly salty, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so scientists here on Earth have discovered evidence that there might be entirely undiscovered ecosystems in water under the Antarctic ice sheet brimming with unknown forms of life, or what they call extremophiles, right? Could microbial Martians be hiding under Mars' southern ice cap? Let's just hope the water isn't too salty to sustain life, which is, of course, a distinct possibility. No, it's not. Life can be anywhere. As usual, this research is just the tip of the iceberg. And much more data is needed to confirm the presence of this body of Martian water. If these findings are confirmed, though, it would greatly increase our chances of finally answering one of David Bowie's lingering questions, whatever that means. David Bowie fan there, I guess. Okay. So that's Mars water. So yeah.
Being able to access water sources could also help humans survive inside spacesuits
on Mars. Hopefully that water isn't too salty because we can't drink it. And again, no splashing, no diving, even in your spacesuit.
Yeah, see,
you don't want to crack your space helmet diving into the Martian wading pool.
And BT Dub, there was also water discovered on comets. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm being cynical, but it's just like, okay.
So we have life on comets.
So there's water on a planet nearby.
You're saying BFD?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's like water on a bunch of moons, and there's water on comets, and comets hit planets, and of course there's water.
Of course
there.
there's water there. Yeah. Well, we know there's ice there, and the ice is not.
It's the liquid water that they're talking about. It's a big deal,
the
right?
liquid water.
Yeah. Liquid water, not solid water.
That's right. Well,
water was discovered on comets close to the sun.
Yeah. Yeah. This comet that is incoming has now discovered to have water on it. Holy crap. And then it's moving away, and they're like, nope. Later scans show that it doesn't have any water.
David Bowie has a song called Life on Mars.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, folks. We have computer problems.
Yeah.
And we saw sparks coming out of the cable to the monitor.
Yeah.
So I forgot to switch the screen over to the Watcher. We were not watching the Watcher.
That's right. We were not watching the Watcher. And well, we had this external monitor. And when Kyle went to plug it in, it was like, and I was like, whoa, just unplug that right now. So,
yeah.
So,
all right, so I got this other thing, and okay.
Have you seen pictures of the ice cap? By the way, I was just going to show look at like the way it's swirly. Like it looks
I have
like a
not
galaxy.
seen that picture. But
that's an awesome one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Why does it look like a galaxy?
So did you see this story? End of days. Mystery as sky turns black in the middle of day in remote Russian towns, with locals blaming secret weapons test.
I did see that.
Or the devil.
Yeah.
I don't know whether to blame God or the devil.
It was definitely Satan. Yeah, I did see the story. I didn't read it. Let's hear it.
Mystery surrounds the sudden appearance of a massive black cloud that turned day into night across an area bigger than the British Isles. And there are claims of the terrifying phenomenon could have been caused by the dust from a meteorite strike or the test of an apocalyptic weapon. Other explanations for mystified locals are a UFO, an unreported eclipse, the work of the devil, or smoke from unidentified wildfires. Moscow's defense and meteorological officials have failed to comment on the cloud. No, they have succeeded to not comment on the cloud, which hit three vast, mainly Arctic districts in the Yukatia region.
Yeah.
There were no reports of meteorites, eclipses, or weapons tests, let alone sightings of alien spacecraft. But there's some pictures here. It doesn't, in the pictures, it doesn't look...
It's red, right?
Really dark, but I mean...
It's kind of a reddish orange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty
That's pretty dark for the middle of the day.
Yeah. Oh, they're getting darker.
Oh.
The photos are...
Wow.
Anyway.
So the Watcher says, remember, it always happens in Russia because Russia is the largest country in the world. It has nothing to do with anything else. All right, what else you got?
Yeah,
Lay it
that's
on me.
pretty cool. Okay, so just earlier today, I found this story, and I had it pulled up. Okay, here it is. Reloading. Bodies keep shrinking on this island, and scientists aren't sure why.
What?
So I was like,
Click.
yeah, are they losing weight? And they're not sure why. The Indonesian island of Flores has given rise to smaller hominins, humans, and even elephants.
Oh, the Homo florensis.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
In 2003, researchers digging in a mountain cave on the Indonesian island of Flores discovered astonishing fossils of a tiny human-like individual with a small chimp-sized brain. They called the species Homo floresiensis.
Yeah.
These relatives of modern humans stood just over 3 feet tall. Several villages in the area, scientists noted, are inhabited by people whose average height is 4 feet 9 inches.
Wow.
Was this the result of interbreeding long ago between taller modern humans and shorter Homo floresiensis? 15 years after the bones' discovery, a study of the DNA of living people on Flores has delivered a verdict.
Yes.
Actually, yeah, it's no.
Oh. They're just short there.
So check it out. Okay. I guess I don't need to read the full article, but basically they did these DNA tests on the inhabitants that, nearby villages near the cave where they found the little tiny people. And these people are, what did it say?
Like 3 feet.
Yeah. The bones from the people but the
modern people are 4 feet 9 inches or whatever. That's what they said.
Yeah, exactly. They found no similar like DNA strains. So now they're thinking like the elephants that came there, that were the tiny elephants. They can't find they look like the same species of elephant from
Africa or whatever, the huge ones. Yeah, but they're not.
Yeah, basically what they're trying to figure out now is like something about this island shrinks
stuff.
That's awesome. And so they're talking about it in terms of evolution, right? Well, maybe it's because there's not a lot of food on the island, and so things get smaller.
Right. That's exactly what Darwin said about the same deal. He was like thinking that the elephants were small because there's not as many resources.
So what it made me think of was your
magnets.
Idea. Yeah, magnets, number one. But your idea about languages, like
dialects and stuff.
So you talked about how, like, I think we just discussed this on a recent podcast.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
When we separate from each other, or like say some people move, further west or whatever, and their accents all start to change.
Yeah.
And then they kind of stay that way. Once they get there,
they don't keep changing.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like
there's regions of
of
magnetic effect or something kind of effect. Yeah.
And then in Robert Schoch's book that I'm just going through over and over and over again because trying to get all the information memorized, he talks about how there actually is scientific proof that the electromagnetic fields alter DNA in strange ways. And so that a CME or something could actually cause mutating species of, basically new species or whatever. So I don't know. I was just thinking about the whole thing in that context. Like, it's not. There's something about those islands or that area.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a geomagnetic situation, or I don't know.
like the town in India. Like we were talking about this before. Like the town in India where everybody has twins, and like that place where people keep falling asleep for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's places also. I think there's a place in the United States somewhere where their average lifespans are much, much longer. It's that whole question, like, is it something in the water, right? That people think it's in the wells or whatever, that like you're drinking this water of life, like it's that idea, but maybe it's, and it actually could be complex, like all of those things. Something in the water, something in the magnetic field, something in the ether. There may be like a weird atmospheric lens causing sunlight to be different there. I don't know. There's all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of, like, I was thinking about this when we were talking about this last time. But there are these other weird things that have happened throughout history, like the dancing plague. Have you heard of that? They blame that now on escargot, right? Like people eating bad eating bad seafood, basically. Escargot is like some kind of seafood. It's gross. Like,
okay. They get scurvy?
No, I think scurvy is a vitamin C deficiency or something like that.
From eating too much seafood and not enough of anything else.
Yeah. No citrus. Escargot is sea snails, is what Brett says.
Okay.
So, like, they've blamed it on escargot because, like, apparently, and I'm not sure about this, but escargot going bad can have certain kinds of bacteria in it that can give you hallucinations or it can be a hallucinogen or cause delirium, right? So there's like this thing called the dancing plague, like where people literally danced themselves to death in the middle of the street with no music, and they couldn't stop, and they didn't want to be dancing. They just, and I'm not sure, like, if it happened so long ago that there's no pictures of it, so you
Gave
don't.
birth to techno, folks.
That's right. Oh man, I can't stop. What was that song? Something about you don't stop. Yeah. Anyway, like, so people literally dance themselves to death, like from exhaustion. There's another thing called I think we did talk about this on one show, where stuff started bursting into flame randomly in this one town in Spain, and it was anything that was bright colored, like white sheets hanging out to dry, just burst into flames. Anybody wearing a white shirt, it would just burst into flames, and then
Okay, so there's something just on that, like ELF, extremely low frequency vibrations, can actually, like, even if they're in the electromagnetic spectrum, they can still like resonate with certain fibers or whatever,
and cause extreme heat. But what was making ELF in like the 1400s or whenever this was happening? That's what's fascinating about it.
Radio bursts from space.
Giant whales. EL radio burst from space.
I was thinking about one of the fast radio bursts or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
That was the other story, and I bookmarked, is that
The FRBs,
they just like
saw more.
reported like a whole set of, like, I don't know, extremely fast ones.
Yeah. I know these are called fast radio bursts, but these were really fast.
But I want to go ahead and before we move on to that, I just scanned through this article. I want to read a little bit more about this. Okay. But so he was talking about how it doesn't happen very often in science that you come up with a definitive answer to your question. No. But he's a geneticist, so he was like, so that happened. It's pretty cool. So he's like, but as often happens in science, the answer to one question raises new ones. The study shows that at least twice in ancient history, humans and their relatives, known as hominins, arrived on Flores and then grew shorter. And not just humans.
Wait, grew
shorter. And not just humans. Other research has shown that elephants also arrived on Flores twice, and both times the species evolved into dwarves. So what mysterious power does this island have to shrink the body? When the fossils of Homo floresiensis first came to light, many researchers hoped they might still hold fragments of DNA. They were encouraged by the initial dating of the fossils, an estimated age of perhaps just 13,000 years. DNA analysis might have settled the debate over how Homo floresiensis fits into the hominin family tree. Excuse me. Some researchers argued that the bones simply belong to a modern human with a growth disorder. Others argued that they belong to a much more distant branch of the human tree, evolving from a taller hominin species called Homo erectus.
Yeah.
In 2007, Harawati Sudoyo, a geneticist at the Ajikman Institute for Molecular Biology in Indonesia, brought samples of Homo floresiensis fossils to Dr. Green, then at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany. Hard as he and his colleagues tried, they failed to get any definitive DNA from the fossils. We could never really make sense of it. Years later, Dr. Green and his colleagues made two important discoveries. They found that humans and Neanderthals interbred. About 1% of the DNA of living non-Africans comes from those vanished hominins. And researchers discovered a separate branch of hominins known as the Denisovans.
Yeah.
The Denisovans and humans also interbred, with the result that living people in East Asia, Australia, and the South Pacific still carry some Denisovan DNA.
Yeah.
At a 2012 scientific conference, Dr. Green and Dr. Sudoyo got to talk about Homo floresiensis and realized they might not have to look for its DNA in fossils. What if the ancestors of the people around the cave had interbred with the extinct hominins, inheriting genes for a pygmy body type?
Yeah.
In 2013, they organized a trip to Flores to visit a village called Rampasasa near the cave. With the consent of village elders, they took saliva samples from 32 villagers. As the researchers extracted DNA from the samples and analyzed it, other scientists were taking a new look at the Homo floresiensis fossils. They realized that the initial estimate of their age was wrong. Instead, the fossils are at least 60,000 years old.
Oh.
So I was going to ask you about that. Like, we need to look into. I didn't have time. This was actually, I just found this right before.
Last I remember, Homo floresiensis, or whatever, however you were saying it.
It's like
Florensis.
Floresiensis.
Okay, floresiensis were being dated anywhere from 45 to 15,000 years ago.
Okay.
So they're dating it now to 60,000 years ago? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah. So it's saying that finding drastically narrowed the window during which modern humans might have shared flores and interbred with Homo floresiensis.
What was the name of the village near the cave where they found them? I bet that translates to Shorei.
Rampasasa. Shorei. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so they were thinking.
So basically, they're saying they found that a very small percentage of the villagers' DNA came from Neanderthals.
Yeah,
Neanderthals.
Neanderthal. Yeah, whatever.
Or Denisovans. A tiny portion could not be matched to humans, Neanderthals or Denisovans.
Okay.
But these enigmatic pieces weren't dramatically different from human DNA, as you'd expect if they had come from Homo floresiensis. So they concluded that the Rampasasa villagers have no Homo floresiensis ancestry.
Even though they haven't actually found any Homo floresiensis DNA.
Right.
So that's not a good conclusion to make yet,
Yeah.
I would say.
They're saying it's too similar to human, but I don't. Yeah,
Right.
I don't know. I'm not a freaking.
But like, I mean,
geneticist.
on the other end, you'll hear him say things like, "Well, 98% of our DNA is exactly the same as a chimpanzee." So yeah.
what he's saying is that this is the conclusion or the reasoning. The Rampasasa villagers aren't short because they descended partly from Homo floresiensis. Instead, their ancestors were taller humans.
Okay.
So a larger portion of their DNA was Denisovans and Neanderthal.
Right. Yeah.
And this tiny, tiny little portion that they couldn't really identify was not enough to make them short now.
Okay, I
Is
gotcha.
what he's I think that's the reasoning.
I got you.
But he's saying that at some point after they came to Flores, they became very short, as did Homo floresiensis before them. And they're not the only mammals to have shrunk.
So is that island is it in the Pacific?
It's in Indonesia. So he's saying, so this is where he gets into the elephants. The dwarf elephants on Flores, now extinct, were only as tall as the shoulder as a human. Judging from related species elsewhere in Southeast Asia, their ancestors were likely full-sized. So humans have evolved pygmy bodies on a few other islands, including a few in the Philippines and Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean. Small populations have evolved short stature in rainforests in Africa, South Africa, and elsewhere.
Okay, yeah. So Brett has posted up here, insular dwarfism, a form of phyletic dwarfism, is the process of and conditioning of large animals evolving or having a reduced body size when their population's range is limited to a small environment, primarily islands. This is the phenomenon of shrinking on islands. They don't know why it happens, but they posit that it occurs due to limited resources. Less food equals smaller size. They also say that a lack of predators reduces size. This must mean that humans used to be giant because there were tons of huge predators.
That's what I was going to get to. Like, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, they're talking about dwarfism, but then when you mention giants, they're like,
Right. So it's in the Indian Ocean. I can't remember. I can never remember where that is. That's Pacific, right? Is it Atlantic or Pacific?
I don't know.
Because what if the island itself actually used to be huge, and now it's tiny, and that's Lemuria or ancient Mu or what? Okay, Indian Ocean is south of China, west of Madagascar. That doesn't answer my question.
Well, that's got to be in the Pacific then.
Yeah.
if it's west of Madagascar, which is an island off of the southern Africa.
Africa's on both sides.
Yeah, west of that, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know.
East of Madagascar. Now I'm really confused. Is it the Pacific or the Atlantic? Damn it.
I don't know what's going on here. Stupid map. It's upside down. Anyway, I just thought I thought that was really interesting. So then they go into the basic standard model ideas of evolution, and that they had, they also have like some genes that can be small, and so those became more dominant because of whatever their conditions were on the island, and so they just got short.
Yeah. And that's making me think of, because I just went through Rupert Sheldrake's Science Set Free, the whole book of Science Set Free, where he has the 10 questions for materialists, and one of the main questions, or the things that he talks about in there, is the missing heritability problem, right? So he says that a tape measure is like massively more accurate at determining height of descendants than genes are. So he talks about this huge test they did that the British scientists did. I think it was British scientists, but they did this massive test where like tens of thousands of people, I think they did it with, I can't remember, 30,000 people. Or anyway, the point is that they went and they were parents, right? So they went and got samples of all their genes, or they had samples of all their genes or whatever, and they went and identified the ones that they think have to do with how tall you are. Okay. And they looked at the genes of the parents. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And then they like tried to guess how tall their children would be. And then when they went and looked at the genes of the kids, right? Or when they went and looked at actually how tall the kids were, they got 5%. They were like 5% correct or something like that. Yeah. Or maybe it was 15%. But then but he said that if you go with a tape measure and you just measure the height of the parents, you can estimate to like 85% accuracy the height of the kids.
Right.
Right. So that's called the missing heritability problem. So these guys are looking at height with genes. They have no idea. They have no fucking idea.
Dude, I remember that. You told me that a long time ago.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I seem to remember there was something about whoever did that study. It was like a geneticist or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay, so we just did this massive thing. We just wasted all these years.
Yeah.
Like the whole.
Yeah, because they had to wait for them to have kids and something like that. In some cases, yeah. And they wasted all this time. Yeah.
But I mean, the whole idea, the theoretical model behind genetics.
Yes, exactly.
It's just like, have we just wasted all of our freaking time with this whole model because it doesn't actually predict anything?
Right. And so Rupert Sheldrake likens it to, he says the genes inform on protein chains, right? So he's like, those are like bricks. Like think of the different protein chains as various building materials. Mm-hmm. Now you can go out and if you analyze a bunch of bricks, you're not going to get the plans for the house. Right?
Yeah.
That's what he said. That's his analogy. Like you can, if there's a pile of rubble out there from a fallen down house, you go out there and you analyze a board and a brick and a piece of concrete and some mortar. You have no idea what the house looked like from that.
Right.
Right.
It's like Puma Punku.
Yeah, exactly. You can't fucking figure it out based on blocks everywhere. So
a couple of people find an H and an I and they shove the I to the H.
Clearly this was the castle.
You got to put an image of that up there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I had sent. I was sending.
One of our previous guests.
Yeah, Matt Stone. We were in this big group text that was like freaking pissing me off because they kept sending all this stuff, and I'm like, please take me out of this group, and they wouldn't do it. So I just started spamming them with pictures of ancient blocks. Every time somebody would add another thing to the group, I would just like put in like all these pictures of ancient blocks, and I put one of the Puma Punku blocks.
The H blocks.
Matt, was that the castle?
Yeah, clearly those are the ruins of the castle. It's one of those responses where you're like, damn, I wish I'd have thought of that.
Yeah.
Of course it's the castle. All right, so I have a little more space news here. Canada's new radio telescope picks up mysterious deep space signal.
Is this the fast radio burst thing?
I don't know. Years from now, historians and astronomers may look back at our current time as the beginning of a new era in which humanity finally knows for certain that it is not alone in the universe. Thanks to improvements in our telescopes, astronomers are detecting and identifying more and more unexplained radio signals in deep space. While these have so far all been theorized to have natural origins, it will only take one extraterrestrial radio signal to change human history forever. Well, it won't change history, just the present and the future. But history will probably stay the same.
What? Retrocausality.
Oh, yeah, could be, yeah. Of course, historians and astronomers might also look back and shake their heads in disgust at our vain attempts to find cosmic companionship after they discover that we are truly alone forever and ever in the black, heartless void of space. Good grief. Still, new radio signals are being detected every day, lending hope that one will be the one. Just last week, the brand new CHIME, that's an acronym CHIME, CHIME radio telescope in Canada, the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, detected an anomalous radio signal the likes of which have never been seen in space. The signal designated...
They're invisible.
This is it. The signal... The signal designated FRB 180-725A, which is fast radio burst, represents the first known fast radio burst at frequencies below 700 megahertz. Will FRB be the one to change everything?
Yeah.
Let's hope so. For now, much more data will need to be collected before any conclusions about this new radio burst could be made. In a press release issued on astronomerstelegram.org, send a telegram, astronomers? McGill University's P.J. Boyle cautions against making any preliminary speculations about this anomalous radio signal, noting that the data have not been corrected for frequency-dependent beam sensitivity and that further observations to search for repeated bursts at all wavelengths are encouraged.
Yeah.
After this new signal was discovered, several other radio bursts were detected at frequencies as low as 400 megahertz, and preliminary analysis indicates that they are not the result of terrestrial interference. That's one of the things, like the Serptards have been trying to imply that all FRBs are like from nearby microwave ovens and shit like that. You know, oh, well, there's an airport near that radio telescope. Like, well, I think they know that and they've corrected for it. It's like, you know, no, that wasn't from space. It was actually a UFO in the sky going past. Oh, okay, well, that's fine.
I'm going to start calling them Ferbtards.
FRB, Ferbtards. The exact locations from which these radio bursts originated are still unknown, but astronomers are searching for them. As additional FRBs are discovered, I just have to wonder, what if some of these are indeed transmissions from distant civilizations and we simply don't yet have the tools or the know-how to interpret them? Sure, there are all sorts of scientific explanations for how they could be naturally occurring, but as the history of science shows, scientific explanations are merely the best guess we have at the moment. Who knows what any of these signals might one day be discovered to be? Or it's like some kind of computer glitch out there. It's going... Search for that file. Diagnostics, please. There's another fast radio burst from that direction.
Yeah, weren't they first... thinking they might be something about like those quasars or some kind of weird...
Well, yeah, so the original fast radio bursts, and this gets into the redshift problem and all kinds of stuff for how far away they are, because like some of them, they're so apparently distant based on the redshift that they had to be incredibly powerful outbursts, right? And they were saying that can only happen in a catastrophic...
To the power of billions and billions and billions of black holes colliding at once.
Right. It was He-Man. By the power of Grayskull, right? It's something incredibly powerful. But so they were saying that it can only be a catastrophic event that causes an FRB, like something explodes, basically, and causes this fast radio burst. But then they saw one that happened twice. Yeah. And that means it can't be a catastrophic thing that destroys its originator, right? It can't destroy. So when it happens twice, the source wasn't destroyed by the first one. So it can't be that. It can't be catastrophic, whatever it is.
What if two black holes collided while another one went right in front of them? So we actually saw it happen twice because of the time dilation when the other black hole passed by.
Some kind of weird space techno, right? It's like... The black hole lenses it going in front of it.
Yeah. You see it forward and then you see it in reverse.
Clearly, FRBs are space raves. Highly redshifted space raves. That's what they are. All right. So we're going to take a quick break and come back. I think that's all the space news I've got. But we have other interesting things to talk about, right?
Yeah.
You have stuff to talk about.
Space.
And snakes.
pyramids, dolmens, impossible acts, magnetism, and all that other stuff. All right, I just came out of that. I'm going to work on that. But we're back. The sands of time are flowing.
All right, so I wanted to do some podcast updates and audience maintenance. So first of all, I just want to remind you guys that normally we record podcasts on Tuesday and we post them Tuesday night. But whenever we can't do that, our emergency backup podcast night is Thursday. So if you don't see it on Tuesday, expect it on Thursday. Like, we are determined not to miss a week.
Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
It's not there. Because like often we'll actually get done with the podcast and then actually have it uploaded and posted by around 11:30 midnight on Tuesday nights.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we start recording at like 7 o'clock if everything goes right. If everything goes wrong, then we start recording at like 10 o'clock. But anyway, the point is just like, I don't want you guys to think that like we're really determined to have a podcast a week. So if you don't see it on Tuesday or Wednesday morning, then we're probably shooting for Thursday because something happened with one of our schedules and we couldn't make it, like the Watcher. And it's like, whenever the Watcher can't be there on Tuesday, I'm like, let's do it Thursday because the show is so much more improved when he's there. It's like, it's not even a question. Like, it's so much better when he's there to make sure that we're on the straight and narrow. Yeah. And like, now that when he's not there, we're like complaining the whole time that he's not there. Like, well, I don't even know if that's even right because the Watcher isn't here to make sure that it's right. And so I don't know where this is and I don't know who that was or what his name was or when this happened. But anyway, this is the story and I'm not even sure if that's right. So it's better with the Watcher there because it's just far more professional. The other thing I wanted to mention was the website itself, which is brothersoftheserpent.com. It's a blog. I've been doing lots of updates on it. The two things I wanted to point out is the Snake Bros Glossary, which is a collection of images that I've made that are basically all the terms that we've kind of made up or have appropriated for the podcast. So it has basically like their images that give you a sort of a picture, a picture idea of what we're talking about. And then the term itself is big in the center. And then it gives a description at the bottom. So like impossible blocks, this giant, unexplained, enormous blocks of stone. The other thing is the Encyclopedia, which the Encyclopedia...
We were getting lots of flack.
Yeah. People were like, they want to know what this means or what these terms mean. Like, what is the Shamir? What is an Olmec? What is, what are these things? And
what is a dolmen? It's a thing.
Yeah, it's this thing. And then I'm just, like typical Russ. I'm like, go look it up. Yeah. You have Google right there. I mean, you could have looked it up on Google faster than you could have asked me to tell you what it meant. And they're like, but I don't want to know what Google says. I don't want to read Scriptard opinions on this. I want to know what Snake Bros thinks about it. So I was like, I don't want to write an encyclopedia. But I kept getting people asking me, and I was like, you know what? This
it's
would be
like
cool.
Two different people that were not communicating with each other. We're both nailing it with this whole idea at the same time.
And I was like, why is this even happening? But I talked to Kyle about it, and he was like,
I totally didn't back him up.
He was like, hey, that'd be pretty cool. And I'm like, God dang it. So I worked really hard on this thing, and at first it was just, I was like sitting down just like typing. I'm like, fine. Giving everything real short definitions. But of course I got into it, started adding pictures. So now there's this enormous encyclopedia on the blog. And I think it's good. So it's also going to help us with show notes. There's a lot of things now we'll be able to refer you to the encyclopedia. Like if we talk about the Olmecs and we talk about the Olmec, the giant basalt heads, we can just say, go check the encyclopedia because there's an entry in there that has that with those pictures. Or if we talk about like columnar basalt, we can say the same thing, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I just went through basically and like every term that I could think of. First, I went through all the keywords that we use, right? I just defined all the keywords that needed to be defined. And then I was just like thinking of new ones as I went along. So Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic are all in there, like precession of the equinoxes, which no one understands. Like I put a description and I put pictures and people are like, I don't get it. I'm like, I'm sorry. I can't help you. So I just wanted to point those two things out. Also, we have the flat earth on there, which is a pretty cool little widget.
Yeah.
It's a spinning globe. Called the flat earth that it puts little, so whenever somebody logs in or like looks at the blog, it marks their geolocation on the flat earth. This is Spinning Globe.
And they're like,
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Yeah. So up at the top, I explain what the encyclopedia is. That it's. And then I say that, like, look, these definitions don't always align with what you'll find on Wikipedia. If you want those definitions, go to Wikipedia. These are the definitions that are the understandings that we have of it on the show, right? So I'm not script-tarting stuff, basically, when I talk about various different things. Like, if you look it up on Wikipedia, you'll get script-tart. Like on cart ruts, I say that they look like tracks made in when the stone was soft. Now, if you go to Wikipedia, they're going to give you all this script derping about how that's not what it is.
Yeah.
I don't do that. So I'm really proud of it. You guys should check it out. It's pretty cool. And any critiques or suggestions of terms that I haven't thought of would be great. It's pretty extensive though at this point. I haven't been able to think of anything for a couple of days, so I think it's pretty good. So I think those are the two main things I wanted to say about the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Wraps it up pretty good.
Yeah. So,
also, we are still looking for guests. People, professionals in the fields of the subjects that we talk about, or people with direct experience with the subjects that we talk about. Whether they're professional or not doesn't matter because we don't care about that.
Yeah.
But like Patty from Rockwall was awesome.
Yeah.
People like that, people that are, have some connection to some mysterious something or other or whatever.
Yeah.
So if any of you know anybody that you think would be a good guest for the show that we could interrogate.
They know who you are. They know what you've done.
We'll give them our card. Snake Bros. We'll contact you.
Yeah. It's no phone number. Just we'll call you.
So yeah, we're planning. We got a couple of people lined up that should be pretty cool coming up here pretty soon. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
Yep.
One of the other things that I've been dealing with lately is this one word: species.
Yeah. So I was actually listening to an interview with Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock the other night, and one of them said species. So I think it's both ways.
I've been hearing it both ways too. But
Same thing with equator and equator. It's both ways. Like people,
I've been really struggling to stop saying species and say species because I hear you saying it.
Yeah.
And then I've heard other people saying it that way in audiobooks and this and that podcasts or whatever. And then I was listening to something recently and they were saying species. And I'm like, oh,
I think it may be American British.
So I'm doing like I'm just going to get, so this particular species.
It's like I'm listening to it and Graham Hancock is like, yeah, so there was this species of lion or whatever. And Randall Carson's like, yeah, it was this giant species, and I'm like, okay, so it's probably
Puma.
Puma. Yeah. Aluminium. I think it's both
All right. The Watcher's about to nail me. Which one is it?
Callure.
The Callure.
Scientists have found an ancient Callure. Obviously,
remember,
that's not the first color because the rocks were there first and they're gray.
The funny thing is like normally I know how to pronounce a word because I listen to everything and Russ reads.
Right.
So he knows more words than me, but
I
he
don't
doesn't
know
know how to pronounce them. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a dialect difference. That's what the Watcher says. Okay. Advertisement, advertisement.
Okay, it's a dialect difference. See?
Tomato, tomato.
Magnets.
Yeah, probably.
Warsh. Acrost. Acrost does not have a T in it. Anyway, so I have this article about weird shit that I want to read. Oh. It's called Bizarre Wilderness Encounters with the Weird.
All
so
right.
like bizarre encounters with weird stuff. Not just encounters with weird stuff or bizarre things. Just it's both, right?
All right.
I haven't vetted this article, so here we go. There can be no doubt that our planet holds much great beauty and in the form of the many untamed and pristine wildernesses that dot its landscape. Here we can find solitude, myriad wildlife, and natural splendor. But the woods can also be a decidedly spooky place full of both danger and great mystery. Thrumming under the surface of these grand vistas of trees and mountains, one can sometimes find strange forces at work, and the woods can seemingly harbor mysteries and strange entities beyond our ability to grasp. Here is a selection of some truly bizarre and creepy tales of people who have ventured into the woods to find not only the natural world, but perhaps the supernatural as well. Many strange stories from the wilderness seem to involve some sort of bizarre and mysterious entities, and there are quite a few such reports to be found. One odd one comes from the Ask Reddit forum, subreddit. It's the subreddit of Ask Reddit, which I subscribe to, so I see a lot of these. Anytime somebody's like, "What's the most strange encounter you've ever had in the woods?" Like, read that entire thread because it's awesome. They're great. Okay. This concerns the supervisor of a wildland firefighter with the Forest Service of the U.S. state of Idaho, who cited what appears to have been some sort of bizarre shape-shifting entity. In 2004, the witness, an assistant superintendent at the time, along with his crew, had allegedly been in an area called Hell's Canyon.
Yep. That's where you would encounter something strange.
On an emergency call, and they were told that they would likely be there for the night. The supervisor then went out ahead into the forest along a lonely, unpaved logging road on an ATV in order to scout the area ahead. As he made his way along the rather decrepit and treacherous remote road, he allegedly came across a bobcat standing there, crouched right in the middle of his path. And I don't think he's talking about a skid steer.
Just thinking, bring the snake force to Hell's Ravine and we will drink hundreds of beers and there will be a bobcat digging up in a mouth. Yeah.
So he's like surprised at finding equipment out there? What's the problem here? This wasn't so strange in and of itself, as the area has many bobcats. But the startled witness was surprised when, instead of running off with the approach of the vehicle as a normal forest animal would be expected to do, it rather just stood there staring at him ominously. The witness and the bobcat then stayed there at a brief standoff with gazes locked for a few moments before the animal suddenly let out an ear-piercing scream and scampered up a nearby tree. Unsettled by this rather odd encounter, the witness continued on his way undeterred and soon came across a ramshackle cabin overgrown with weeds just off the road right out there in the middle of nowhere, which was strange since it was technically federal land and there should have been no private structures, but there it was. Curious, the witness stopped his vehicle and went to investigate, finding all of the windows tightly boarded shut and the door well secured with chains. It was apparent that someone did not want anyone getting in or out of that cabin, and a peek through a crack in the door showed that the interior seemed to have been ransacked by someone or something. There was a distinct chilly sense of unease that crept up over him, and he glanced around, almost expecting somebody to pop out of the bush, but the woods were quiet. Deciding it's best to get on his way and not wanting any more to do with this spooky cabin, the witness then got back onto his ATV and got back onto the logging road. Yeah, he was like, that's straight up Blair Witch shit right there. I'm getting out of here. The commenter relating the tale explains what happened next thus. Well, here's where it gets real interesting. Right where the bobcat had been, there stands a Native American woman in a badly tattered nightgown and bare feet, just standing there. So he yells at her, asking if she needs help, and she screamed at him, the same scream as the cat from before, and climbs right up the tree.
Oh, wow.
Faster than any human has a right to be climbing. Obviously, he nopes out of there as fast as he can. Unsure of who or just what he saw, he asks a local guy about the cabin. After asking around a little, a local Native American hears them talking and informs them that what they saw was called a pumawa. Excuse the likely butchered spelling. Okay, so yeah, it's P-U-M-A, a pumawa. Puma and then W-H-A. So it's like a cat what? In effect, a skin changer or a warg. Now, I would not believe most people that tried to tell me that, but this was a serious man that did not F around about many things. He was dead serious the 2 times I've heard him tell it, and I 100% believe that he saw what he saw. Quite similar to this account is one that comes from a park ranger himself, who claims that he had a very strange experience out in the wilds of Montana. The weird tale begins when the unidentified witness allegedly found a seemingly abandoned cabin out in the middle of the woods, far from any road or town. Next to the isolated house, okay, so this is not even on a road, like an abandoned cabin just by itself in the middle of the woods with no road at all. Next to the isolated house was a shed that seemed to have had a reinforced steel door that rather alarmingly seemed to have been forcibly broken out of from the inside. Looking into one of the windows of the house, he was met by the sight of toppled furniture and a bed that looked to have been shredded by some sort of wild animal. As the ranger examined the house and its shed, he claims that he looked up to see what looked like a Native American man approaching from a clearing, dressed in tattered clothes and looking to be in some sort of trance or daze. The park ranger called out to him, but when he did, the mysterious stranger looked up with an expression of surprise and ran off to disappear into the trees. Already creeped out by the house and its weird shed. He should have checked to see if it was a 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. Snake Bros broke out of there. The ranger decided not to pursue the weird man, instead deciding to come back the following day. When he did, he claims that he found the same man sitting out in front of the house. Once again, when the ranger approached the man, he ran, and this time he ran into the house and locked the door. The ranger then allegedly tried to talk some sense into the stranger, telling him through the door that he wasn't in any kind of trouble and was asking if he was okay. When there was no response, he looked into the window to find apparently no one there at all. As he scanned the interior through the dusk-streaked window, he says that he heard a sudden loud noise from the back of the house, after which a full-grown bear ran right past him to lope off into the forest. Although the ranger admits it might have been coincidence, he was still nevertheless deeply unsettled by the experience and wonders just what was going on with that man and that house. He has, perhaps not surprisingly, not been back to that house since. More difficult to identify is a case of a witness who claims to have been leading a group on a climb at Mount Sterling in North Carolina, when he saw something he can't quite explain. The climb was apparently a very difficult one, and they were about 6 miles from the nearest road, but they had finally reached the top and set up camp for the night. After everyone went to bed, the witness stayed up in a hammock reading a book. Yeah, that sounds like me. Finally deciding to call it a night around 10:30 p.m. The evening was described as very bright, with a full moon shining above. As he prepared to go to bed, the witness claimed that he noticed something coming up the trail, which at first he took to be a bear, but turned out to be a darkened humanoid figure. He would say of what happened, quote, "We were in the middle of nowhere, and there was someone hiking up the trail with no headlamp or any gear. I was just frozen, watching this person move closer to our camp. They arrived at the top of the mountain where we were and just stopped. I watched as what appeared to be a man surveyed our camp. I could only see the outline of him. He stood there for what seemed like 30 minutes, but may only have been 10. He then turned and sat down under a tree facing our camp. He was sitting up in a way that I knew he wasn't trying to sleep. He just sat there staring at our camp. I had no idea what to do. I decided to wait it out. I waited, just staring at the man while he stared at my camp. This went on until about 3:30 in the morning. Then he stood up, took a moment to survey the camp a few minutes longer, and then went back down the trail he came up on. I, to this day, have no idea what that was all about, but it freaked me out. I was paranoid that we were being followed for the rest of the trip." Yeah, screw that.
That would freak me out.
That's like some dude comes up, kind of gets close, and then just sits down in a tree and just stares at you for 3.5 hours or whatever. Screw that, dude. Excuse me. Okay, was this a man, a shadow person, or a ghost, or what? Other strange wilderness experiences seem to be connected more with ghosts and other unexplained paranormal phenomena. One Reddit user called Tytrim89 gave a rather spooky account of an experience he had while poking around at a remote abandoned town out in the woods of North Carolina that the Army had once used as a training area. The witness said of the location, quote, "They replaced the doors and electrical, but everything else they let go to shit, which is very cool because the main house is over 100 years old. After arriving, the man locked the doors to the Jeep they had come in on and went about exploring the grounds, and the witness says of what happened next, thus, "We all end up splitting into small groups, and I end up alone. Yay me. My wife and her friend go around back, and I stay out front walking around and scanning the woods. Then they come back, which is when they tell me that they heard what sounded like 2 little girls laughing and playing out in the woods. So I start walking around with the flashlight, scanning the woods. When we get back, the dome light in the Jeep was on, and one of the doors was cracked open. I shit you not, this starts to freak everybody out. As we were discussing this, we heard the loudest thud come from the house. I compare it to someone dropping a safe on the top floor. This literally shook the house, and I heard the bass in my chest. Now being a prior military guy, I know for a fact it wasn't artillery or ordnance. The rest of our friends that were in the house beat feet, and we got in our cars and left. No one can explain the noise. They were all upstairs, and they looked into a bedroom and then went to the next room, and the boom came from behind them." Another Reddit user called Fleetwood16 relates a frightening experience that happened as he was working one year as a summer camp counselor. One time they took all the kids out on a backpacking excursion, and the evening they set up camp, after which he and one of the other counselors went to a nearby clearing around a quarter of a mile away to do some stargazing. As they were lying there, the sound of water suddenly and inexplicably began to pervade the air around them. Yes, I've read this story on Reddit. Which was strange because they didn't know of any river or creek around in the area, and what the witness described the sound as this: "As we were laying, I heard the beautiful sound of water behind me, and I mean it was beautiful. I've never heard water running before, and thought to myself, wow, this sounds beautiful." You know, like, so basically what he's saying is like he's never listened to running water before and thought, "Holy crap, that's beautiful." Yeah. It's just been running water, but this time that's exactly what he thought. "All I could imagine was crisp, clear water gracefully trickling by. I had this image stuck in my head. I had this sudden urge to go find it. Not just an urge, but a need to find this creek. The witness and his friend got up and peered into the thick forest behind them, wondering whether they should go out there or not. And the feeling they got was of a playful presence, urging them to go find the source of the sound. After a few minutes of wondering what to do, that lovely sound dancing all around them and pulled by that nagging compulsion, they decided to go find it, but oddly the sound got fainter and fainter the deeper they pushed into the dense brush, and things began to get rather scarier. The witness would say, "As we were approaching the sound, it became quieter and quieter. We stopped, not knowing if we wanted to continue. As we stood there, the noise of trickling water became louder and louder until it sounded like we were standing right next to it. Then I said, 'Let's come back tomorrow to find this,' and we agreed to come back later. When I made that decision, the sound of the creek vanished along with the urge to go. There was only silence. The presence I felt earlier suddenly became sinister. It was just this dark feeling of a presence, kind of similar to knowing when someone is watching you. I felt this fear slowly creeping up. The next day, the curious group went back to the site in the assumed safety of broad daylight in order to see if there was a creek there, and they found not a single sign of one, nor anything else that could have possibly explained the sound that they had heard. They even looked at maps, which confirmed that no rivers or creeks flowed through there. In the end, the witness was baffled as to what it could all mean, but seems sure that something very sinister was trying to lure them that evening into the woods. For what purpose, he does not know. He says, "I'm scared to imagine what would have happened if we followed the sound of the water because of the ominous presence we both felt. If I was by myself, I would have thought I was imagining it, but my friend felt, and experienced everything that I did. I don't know what it was, but it was eerie to say the least. What's strange is neither of us said anything to each other once we heard the sound of the water. So they made all the same decisions without actually saying anything.
Yeah.
And yet we both made the decision to go look for it without asking each other, and we both heard the sound of the water becoming louder and then quieter, even though there was nothing there. We both felt the sinister presence trying to lure us in." Yeah, I've read that story before. That was a couple of years old. I remember reading that and being like, you almost got 411 there, buddy.
Should I skirp derp it?
Yeah, you can skirp derp them when I'm done with the article. Adding to these spooky, seemingly paranormal cases is an account from a park ranger on Reddit forum for rangers. He claims that he and another ranger had been called out to search for a man in his 20s who had gone missing in the area while hiking. They ventured out and set up camp for the night on a high ridge commanding a view of the surrounding area. Things would get bizarre later that night in the wee hours of the morning when the witness saw a moving light at the base of the cliffs across the valley a few miles away. He told his colleague about it, and then they decided that this was likely the very man they were looking for, and they would go retrieve him when the daylight came. So the witness says, "The next morning, we decide to go check out the area and bring the guy home. We get to approximately where I saw the light of the night before and start calling his name. Soon we find his body at the base of the cliff. He had fallen 60 feet onto his head. The body was badly mangled. We radio back that it has now become a recovery instead of a rescue. At this point, the other ranger yells to me to come look at this. Lying 20 feet from the man's body was his mag light. It seemed odd, but I thought nothing of it until the other ranger reminded me of the light the night before. It kind of gave me the creeps, but I still dismissed it. Before too long, the coroner arrived and inspected the body. After he took the body back to the lab, he said that the man had been dead for at least 48 hours before we found the body. All of a sudden, the "oh shit" alarm went off in my brain. I knew that it couldn't be possible. I had the coroner review his work, same result. I tried to find an explanation for the light I had seen, perhaps other hikers, but one search and rescue guy had stayed at the only trailhead in the area all night. No one had come or gone. To this day, I have no clue what I saw that night. It freaked me out, though. Okay, so he's got another hiking account here. So other accounts are even harder to classify, leaving us unclear if we are dealing with some mysterious creature, a supernatural presence, psychopaths, or what. But being incredibly unsettling and creepy all the same. One ranger claims on a Reddit forum for rangers to have been working with a coworker out searching for a missing group of teens when they stumbled across something that was really hard to categorize. He says, "We'd been hiking for most of the day and seen nothing. We're about 35 kilometers into the woods, and at this point we start noticing odd things. Sticks carved like spears stuck into the ground, weird carvings in the trees, a stuffed animal hanging from a noose up in a tree. The place was nowhere near any roads, and it wasn't on the regular trails people would go on in the area. The really eerie thing was that everything was freshly carved. Somebody had been there within a couple of hours of us and made these things. Mind you, we're still looking for these teens. We keep on hiking, and eventually we made camp for the night, still kind of on edge from what we had seen earlier. But we settle down anyway and go to sleep. We get up with the sunrise, hoping to cover more ground before it gets too hot. We pack up the gear and get ready to go when I notice a bit of shirt that had caught on a small tree and ripped along with some shoe prints. We were thinking, great, maybe we're close by to these teens, when a radio call comes through. The teens had just been found 20 kilometers east of us, and they're calling everybody back. All those weird things we had been seeing from the day before come flooding back into my mind, and we'd wasted no time getting out of those woods. So they found the kids like 20 kilometers.
Were they following?
Who was it? Yeah. There's also a report from a ranger at Yellowstone National Park on the same forum that is really quite surreal in its bizarreness. The witness says that as he was hiking along a remote, isolated trail about 11 miles from the nearest road at Lamar Valley, he came across something completely unexpected, startling, and quite morbid out there in the woods, which he would say, there in the middle of the trail is a perfectly severed deer head. No blood, no raggedness at the severance. It was perfectly intact. This is weird because I've seen wolf and bear kills, and I used to find cougar kills in SD with radio tracking just after the cougar made them. This was not any of those things. The head was completely uneaten, eyes, tongue, everything intact. Even the ravens hadn't touched it yet. No catching, no scat. Right smack in the trail, but again, no blood. Even a human doing it made no conventional sense. It was a doe, so it had no antlers. Plus, why leave it in the trail? The whole thing, even in broad daylight, gave me the chills. Just an ocean of waving grass, bison calmly grazing, and a perfectly clean deer head right on the path. That is pretty weird. That's pretty weird. What in the world killed that deer? Who or what would have cut his head off so cleanly and leave it in the middle of the trail out there in the middle of nowhere, all while leaving no footprints or evidence or blood?
Samurai!
Once again, I have cut something worthless. It seems almost like it was intentionally placed there. But why would someone or something do that? Where did the rest of the deer's body go? Why was there no blood or sign of scavenger activity? It's hard to say, but this is a damn creepy case to be sure. It certainly does. Certainly not anything anyone wants to come across while hiking out in the woods alone. Yeah, alone would really freak you out. If you're way out there and you're all by yourself and you're like, nope,
Fresh kill.
yeah. So that's it. That's it for the. He's got a little exit from the article there, but that's all I was going to read. So those kind of stories are okay. So this is the thing. The easiest script derp of all that is just to be like, well, this is anonymous Reddit users. Like, people are just making shit up. You know, you can't verify if that was a park ranger or if those people really did that, or is that guy really a camp counselor? But this is the thing. I've read thousands of stories like these, and like, it just gets harder and harder to think that people are making them up, because every one of them is unique in some way.
Yeah.
And yet they all have this very similar. Right. So the Watcher's script now is don't take acid and go into the woods.
But okay, so strange kills in the woods. I've found those. Like,
yeah, that's right.
when I was a kid, I was like hiking out in our woods below our house along the creek, and there were two goats. Well, I found one goat first, like laying in the water of the creek.
Yeah,
bloated.
that's right.
And I was just like, what the heck is this? Like, I didn't even know at first what it was. I went down there, got into the, it's like pretty sheer walls on the creek side.
Yeah.
Shallow water, and it's laying in the water, a couple inches deep. And then I was like checking out its body or whatever, and the only thing I could find were like two little red holes about an inch apart, or an inch and a half apart on its neck.
Right.
And I was like, nope. Okay. I don't know what that is. When you we hunt for the deer meat, and when you shoot a deer, I use a 222.
Yeah.
It's a small, like a narrow round.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been a snake bite. That's a good point, Watcher. But when you shoot a deer, it's like, even when you shoot it and then you go check it out, it's sometimes hard to find the entrance,
right,
of where the bullet is.
So small,
you can see the exit wound usually, like pretty easily, but where the bullet goes in, it's hard to see.
Yeah.
But when you find it, it's one hole.
Right. It's always one.
On one side, and there's a big hole on the other side. This did not have an exit wound.
Right.
It had two very small, just red spots, like bloody spots in the fur, very close together. So Brett says snake bite. Yeah, possibly.
Weird that it bit it on the neck, though.
Yeah, so I was with a couple of friends, and we lugged this thing out of the creek, because we would play in the creek all the time. So we drug it out, and I went and got a shovel and dug a hole. And then while we're doing that, one of the other people are like, "Hey, there's another one." And so we go up further up the creek. There's another one laying in the creek. Same deal. 2 freaking red spots on its neck in the same place. What about that, Watcher? Snake bite?
2 snake bites on the same goat, and then they turn out to be
2 goats, 2 different goats,
and then they turned out to be the
place.
goats belonging to our neighbor, right?
Yeah, because then next thing I know, like he's missing his goats, and they're like, in a locked pen.
Yeah.
So they didn't have any idea how they got out.
Yeah.
It was just the whole thing was a mystery, and I was like, oh, I found them and buried them already.
Sorry.
Yeah, just like I
didn't know they were yours.
Yeah, I just like found 2 freshly dead animals in the creek and got them out of the creek and buried them, and it took a long time. It was hard, but so that's like anomalous dead animal. 2 of them.
Yeah.
Same wound. Totally unsolved.
Were you freaking out when you figured out that they were that guy's goats?
Oh, I just felt really bad. Like I was a kid, I didn't.
Yeah.
It was just a huge mystery. It's like, why do they have 2 dots on there? And I never heard of a chupacabra at that time.
Did the guy look at you and go,
You're gonna be okay, kid. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah, he was. I don't remember how the whole exchange went, but it was really strange. Totally unsolved. But so on the water thing, like I've experienced this multiple times in the woods. Like, there's this weird thing. Like, I've been in the woods, like way, way out in the middle of nowhere. Did not know there was a creek or anything there, and I would like hear the water.
Yeah.
Suddenly, just like.
Yeah. I've done that too.
And I'm like, what? And then like try to go towards it, try to find it, and it's like.
It can be hard.
Yeah. There have been times when I've heard water and just try to follow it, and then it just like gets quieter and quieter, and I think I'm going towards it, and then all those same things. Sometimes I don't find it. Other times I have found it, and like one of the times that I remember finding one, it was this beautiful like waterfall about 14, 15 feet high, and it was a seasonal creek, what we call a seasonal creek. It had probably a seeping spring, and when the water table's high enough, that spring would start running, but under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be running.
Yeah.
Or, well, drought circumstances, it wouldn't be running. So there's that. And then the other thing is that there are certain trees that I've heard, like some of the nicknames for them are water trees. Like when the leaves blow, it sounds like running water. Like a buddy of mine, they bought one and planted it next to their house. And like every time it was slightly breezy, it sounded like running water.
Oh, wow.
I mean, just the way the leaves rustle with each other just sounds exactly like it.
Yeah. And that would explain why it would get fainter when you're looking for if the wind was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now that doesn't explain the strange feelings that they had and the fact that they were kind of making the same decisions at the same time.
Yeah.
Another thing I've experienced with people.
Yeah.
From time to time, but so yeah,
I've definitely been in the woods and suddenly got that like being watched sensation. Yeah. But like a lot of times you don't know. I mean, it could be anything. A squirrel.
Yeah.
A squirrel's like human.
Scaredy squirrel.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, we're like, ooh, squirrel. Do they do the same thing with us?
Yeah.
Human.
Yeah. But
so anyway, I was getting this acorn and human.
Yeah. Well, we got to take a break, but when we come back, I wanted to talk about the shapeshifter stuff. Like,
the first stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting stuff. So
also weird cabins out in the woods. Don't go into them because they're probably full of snakes.
I don't want to talk about those.
Burn it. Just get some gas and burn it down. And we are back. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, episode 59, second hour, first segment. We were talking about weird experiences in the woods, ghosts and skinwalkers and snakes and goats and burning shit down. So Kyle was scripting everything that I just read.
Yeah.
Actually, he wasn't. He was doing a good job of giving like similar experiences that he's actually had. So lending credence to these anonymous Reddit users' stories.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just... You could assume that they're all just making it up. But I've had enough unexplained, strange experiences to know that, like, you know, if I wrote one of those stories describing the situation with the goats, like, it would be one of those. I mean, it would sound very similar.
Right.
And people would be like,
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, Reddit user Snake Broquet wrote.
So, but I wanted to talk about the skin changer thing, like, really not so much in the context of
Skinwalker or shapeshifters. Yeah,
like not so much in that, but the idea of more like a warg.
Yeah,
where like that is, I'm not real. It's hard for me to believe that you can actually just turn into a newt.
Yeah, and then get better.
Yeah, and then get better. I like the werewolf idea. I think is actually like might be sort of an esoteric.
Yeah, I agree.
Thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that, but I just like I don't think that I'm not real convinced on the shape-shifting idea, but the warg idea, like where like a skinwalker, I guess.
So you know what a warg
it.
is? You know what that is? Like I'm asking you because I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. So somebody who can like put their consciousness into the animal,
okay,
and see through the animal's eyes, hear like in other words, they can experience all the senses of the animal and also control the animal.
But somewhere they're sitting cross-legged, like meditating,
eyes rolled back into the back of their head or whatever.
Gotcha.
You know, any way you would depict. I mean, you know, I guess in myth and legend, like there were people that could do it with multiple animals at the same time. Like, you know, and some people have abilities with one animal versus another.
Yeah. I've read that I didn't know that was called warg or whatever. That's cool. But I've read that like one of the problems with that ability was that people would use that to become immortal. Like their body is dying and they would go into the animal and then their body would die and they're dead, but now they're here. And then after that, they become a restless spirit that shifts from. Or
if they're powerful enough, they can move themselves into a human.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Possess somebody else's body and kick them out.
Right. Start speaking Latin and.
So, but I mean, I think that we are connected, you know, on a conscious or a subconscious level, you know, in another dimension. I don't know how to describe it, through the spirit, right? Whatever this
or entanglement or something. Yeah.
Like, you know, not talking about physics necessarily, like like the weave and the woof, like the across the veil.
I got you.
Like wherever consciousness comes from, like that's kind of like the way we talk about it on this show is like, you know, consciousness is fundamental to the physical realm, but it actually doesn't rely on it.
Yeah. Its properties do not come from the physical realm.
Consciousness exists elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's non-local. You know, which is why we have these weird glitches like deja vu and you know, retrocausality and stuff. And we've discussed how like the possibility that consciousness is outside of, or say in a higher dimension than that of time. So I've been thinking about this recently, like whenever you are looking at dimensional things, like if we go back to just like graphing dimensions, and you have a line, right? A one-dimensional object or something is just a line,
right?
There's no if you're in the one dimension, there's no way to to tell.
I know
about the higher dimensions, right?
I got you.
But if you're in, if then you extend that to two dimensions, you have an area. then it's easy. If you're in the 2-dimensional space, you can see a line and see where its position is in the 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
Because you're 1 dimension above it.
Right.
Right. But the line exists in the 2-dimensional space, but can't really understand how it moves through the 2-dimensional space.
Yeah.
So then when you go to 3 dimensions, it's the same thing for the plane. Like the 2-dimensional plane exists inside the 3-dimensional cube.
Yeah. And you can imagine the plane because you're 3-dimensional.
Right.
You can kind of look down on
you
it.
can see the plane and its position in the 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
But if you're in the 3 dimensions, you can't imagine the 4th or where you are in the 4th.
Yeah.
And if the 4th dimension is time, that's why we don't really exist. We exist in time, but we're not above it dimensionally speaking.
Yeah.
Like our physical bodies are not. So it's hard for us to imagine which direction we're going in time or whatever.
Yeah.
It appears that everything is the same. But if you were a 5th dimensional being,
Yeah.
you could look down on these 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st dimensions and understand them all and their position
Yeah.
in your 5th dimensional realm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I look at it. Like, so if consciousness comes from a dimension that is higher than that of time, then it's easy for consciousness to actually see a position or see all of the possible positions of the 3rd dimension in time.
Yeah.
That's why we might have these strange
Deja vu or whatever.
effects, because
Retrocausality.
we're like, so if it's like you put all of your senses down multiple dimensions below where your like consciousness is.
Yeah.
Then it's hard for you to perceive anything above that, right? You're within it, but
I got you.
Okay. So if all these life forms have consciousness, and that consciousness comes from somewhere else, it's non-local. There's no, to me, it seems plausible that we can interact with each other on a consciousness level.
Yeah.
Right. And we probably are all the time, which is how we recognize, like we're looking at a cat or a dog doing something around the house, and you just like, you understand these things about what they're thinking, even though you can't, it's just like, you find properties that are similar to yourself, in them, in nature, all over the place. Like we see symbolism about ourselves, and I don't know. I just think that it is
like what they call anthropomorphizing, where you're which is like a script term for like you're applying human characteristics to something that is non-human, and therefore it's faulty. But that's not actually true, because you can recognize when an animal is sad, or when it's being playful, or when it's like laughing at something, or thinking, or it's kind of annoyed, or it's embarrassed. I've seen my cat be embarrassed. It kind of walks off pretending that nobody's laughing. You can totally tell that's happening. Ears are slightly folded back. Like that did not just happen. Nobody talk about this, okay?
So we've talked about this before too, about language. Going back to the idea of Babel, that language itself was the confusion. The confusion was the confusion of tongues.
Yeah.
So it's like one way to analyze that is that like perhaps they were communicating prior to the the disaster of the Tower of Babel, the bringing down of the tower and the confusion of tongues. They weren't using tongues.
Right.
They were all of the same language,
which is why there's very little written stuff from that period.
Yeah.
There is no recorded stuff written down because people weren't using that language.
Right. And there's all this mythological stuff about, people having higher states of being where they could read, there was telepathy and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that animals actually use these forms of language.
Yeah.
And
we've lost it.
Have kind of tested it out with my dog, and sometimes it works.
Yeah.
But it's like, I can't really speak it well.
Right.
Because I'm so confused with the tongues.
Right.
And the dog is like, yeah, that's for getting your attention.
Yeah.
Like, you've got my attention. Stop yelping at me, right?
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. It's like, I'm paying attention to you already. Anyway, so
I'm paying attention to you already. Now let me read your mind.
Yeah. And my mind's going, blah, blah.
Your mind is in there going, yep, 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 yep. Yeah.
Turning it all into, it's like, he's like, you're sub-vocalizing again.
Yeah.
Your thoughts.
Stop babbling at me.
Right.
Yeah.
So looking at it in that context, like it would be, I don't know. I like to think about the idea of a warg or whatever that maybe some people like maybe there's just strange things with autism. I'm just like throwing that in for the hell of it, but they understand things or like there's weird mental conditions that people just get stuff.
Yeah.
Without converting it into language, or they just have a knowing ability.
Yeah.
So some people might have the ability to just connect with a specific creature.
Yeah.
And experience it.
Right.
Experience it, what it experiences. Right.
So the story about the house with the shed and the strange native guy who runs inside, and then the park ranger looks in there, can't see him, and then this giant bear runs out the back. Yeah. That is like so the implication there is it's shapeshifter.
That he's shapeshift, right?
Right. Like that. Not that he took control of the bear, because his body would have been in there still somewhere. Right.
Right.
But now, of course, the ranger didn't get in the house.
Right. In a state of like where he's just like he's got to scare the park ranger away. Or,
yeah.
I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
I'm gonna go in here and go into a coma state.
Yeah.
And go into the bear.
Yeah.
Which is the bear is sleeping right now.
Right. The bear's sleeping.
Wake up that bear. I don't know. I'm not trying to skirt the shapeshift thing.
Yeah, maybe he just went back there and slapped the bear and woke it up, and the bear goes running out.
Yeah, exactly. That is another thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't really so much about those stories. It just that brought that idea up to me, that I think that's totally something that is possible. That
so there's this thing
on a mental level you can connect with other consciousnesses.
Yeah. So your thing about, I've got two things I want to say about that. Like while you were talking about consciousness being fundamental and about how that affects, things like deja vu and stuff like that. And it was reminding me, okay, again, I've read Rupert Sheldrake's book, Science Set Free. Mm-hmm. And I love these things like where somebody's done the scientific study and found something weird. Right. And this is one where they were, and I may not remember the specifics exactly, but it basically involved people just sitting there in a room by themselves. They had sensors on them so that the researchers could detect physiological changes, right? Similar to other ones where they've detected that people are knowing when they're about to be right before they actually know that they're right. You know what I'm talking about? Where they put these sensors on their skin so they can tell, and it's a physiological, non-conscious change, something that people can't control, like a lie detector stuff. So the idea was the people are just sitting there and they've got a button or something like that. And they're just sitting there, and their job was to just sit there and think about the button and then decide every once in a while to push it, just whenever they wanted, right? And what they found was that about 200 milliseconds before the person made the choice to push the button, their physiological stuff started to change. Okay. So they were measuring brain waves plus the physiological stuff, right? So before the brain waves shifted to show that the person had made the choice to push the button, they had this physiological shift as well, right? And the research, like some of the researchers said that shows that we don't have, that we actually don't have free will, that everything is physical in some way, right? So there was this whole material. The entire book is about materialism versus something else. Mm-hmm. So this is what he was saying. So he's showing one argument was that this proves that we don't have free will, that everything is a physical thing, and the physical choice was made, right? And then the person then thinks they've mentally made the choice, and then they push the button. Okay. But what was interesting is that sometimes a physiological thing would happen, and the brainwaves would shift towards the choice and then go away from it, and then they wouldn't push the button. And so he was like, so the other argument is that what we have is not free will, but free won't.
I like that.
Right. And when I read it, it reminded me of one of the things you said a long time ago about your initial impulse. And to follow that initial impulse. Right. So if the first impulse is coming from your true consciousness, some non-local higher self, and it's saying, you should do this, what you're doing is choosing not to if you don't do it.
Yep. That's
free
actually...
won't.
So what
fucking free won't.
That's cool. That's an interesting subject.
Because it's giving you suggestions, right?
Yeah.
But your choice is to not follow the suggestions.
Which is actually most of the time.
Right.
Unless you are falling down a cliff in a squirrel suit.
That's right.
And then you
don't have time to choose
right.
not to.
You don't have time to choose not to. You just do what
exactly.
the first impulse is.
That's exactly what I thought too.
Like
Free won't.
I have this time where I practice this, and I've totally forgotten about it, but I'm going to try it again. I realized that I had these extremely low level signal, like
Yeah. Like impulses
just
to do something.
tiny
Yeah.
little, like incredibly brief impulses of a complex idea
Yeah.
that was almost, I wouldn't even pay attention to it most
Yeah.
of the time. And I would actually, after the fact, literally have to think back and just like what actually happened when I heard someone say this? What was my immediate mental reaction? And I would remember like, okay, I actually thought this, I'd work my way back through the thought processes and find this was my first impulse and I didn't do it. And maybe I should have done that. And so then I started trying to do it and it would happen over and over and over where I would think I was doing the first impulse, and then I would like afterwards I would think back and make sure, and I'm like, no, dude, there was something else before that. And so I kept trying to remain conscious of that and got real aware of it, and then started acting on it. And it was just like, synchronicity city, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're gonna take a quick break. We gotta take another break, but we'll come back and keep talking about this. And I've got the other thing that I thought of when you were talking about all your things. So yeah, we're gonna take a quick break, come back for the last segment, and finish out the show. It'll be awesome.
Synchronicity city.
Yeah, first impulse.
Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We're back. Last segment of episode 59. Synchronicity City all over the place. It's a massive mega metropolis.
A mega metropolis of mind explosions. Mind blown. All right, so the other thing I was thinking of when you were giving your descriptions of things, you were talking about dimensions and about the difficulty of seeing a higher dimension from a lower one, or how when you're in a higher dimension, you can easily see the shape of and structure of a lower dimension.
Or the position of a lower one,
Yeah. Or just
the position of a lower dimension in the higher.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, or even the shape of it.
Yeah, true.
Like you can fully comprehend the shape of a plane in the third dimension.
Right.
If you're in the second dimension, the plane is your dimension.
Right.
So you can't actually totally fully comprehend what its shape is because you are in it.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like with the third dimension,
but you can comprehend the shape of the one dimensional.
Yes.
Right.
So like
you can see that line, bro.
Yeah, you can see the line.
Don't cross this line.
I've made a blue line. Don't wait. So like we're in the third dimension and we can't actually comprehend its shape. We can make three-dimensional figures and say, here's a cube, here's a triangle, here's a pyramid, right? But we don't know the full shape of our dimension. We don't know what it looks like.
Right.
Now, if we were above it, we might be able to say, like, here is the complete third-dimensional shape. Here is what, like we can imagine a plane that just goes on for infinity. We know it's flat and,
Right.
Anyway, I was thinking of UFO sightings and Jacques Vallée, who's I have a bunch of his books. I've read a bunch of his books, and he talks about how UFOs are not what they seem to be. Like they're not, like people have for a long time tried to ascribe them to like nuts and bolts. Like people who believe in them, first of all, you have to get away from the scriptards saying that they're not real at all, and they're just toothless idiots. Like
nothing that's flying is unidentified.
Or it's only unidentified by those morons that live out in the country.
Yeah.
But us scientists know exactly what they are. Anyway, the descriptions of UFOs, like you guys saw one, some kind of strange sky phenomena that sort of came in and seemed to morph, shape, and shift and change. So he gave this picture of imagine a higher dimensional object. So okay, I'll start with this. Like, imagine the 2-dimensional plane, the flat, like, it's a square or whatever, the flat plane. And then I've got this 3-dimensional object, like say it's a dumbbell, like a for lifting weights, right?
Yeah.
So it's big round, it's got a narrow like handle, and then another big round thing. And then say I dropped it slowly through that 2-dimensional plane, starting with the bottom bell and then moving into the handle and then going back to the bottom. Like somebody who lived in the 2nd dimension would see this enormous round thing appear just out of nowhere.
Right.
And then it would suddenly shrink to this little circle.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it would get really big again. And then it would vanish, right? So let's say that I was moving it across the plane while I was doing that. So it would like appear over here and it would get big circle and then it would shrink into this little circle and then it'd get big and then vanish.
Right.
Okay. So he is ascribing a lot of strange morphing UFO things to something similar, that some 4th, 5th dimensional higher object is passing through our 3rd dimensions like that.
That's badass. So if you had, let's say you just had a shaft, a rod or a stick or something, and you were passing that through the 2-dimensional while you were rotating it,
Yeah.
it would look like it started over here and zoomed over to the right and then
Right.
hauled ass back the other direction.
Exactly. And then vanishes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can do impossible shape-shifting because you can't comprehend the full shape.
Right.
You're just
And
seeing
you would think like it defied the laws of inertia or whatever,
right,
right?
and physics
It just-
and everything. Yeah. It's not. It's
Because
just
it's actually got its own inertia and it's flipping over.
it's operating under its own laws in its higher
cool.
dimension. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
So it's a good mind picture to try to understand some of the strange sky phenomena that people have seen. Now, I don't know if that applies to shape-shifting humans. Like, you can imagine that, like, if there's some higher entity, it's able to appear as a human, but maybe its like outline will like strangely morph sometimes because it's just all we're seeing is like a cross section of it, And I mean, even there have been philosophers who've talked about like that we are 4th dimensional, like time worms.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because we our will or our consciousness only exists linearly across time, that we experience ourselves from front to back or from beginning of the worm to the end of the worm in cross sections, one after the other.
Yeah.
The eternal present, and we're moving past the worm, and so the worm a person like starts out as a baby and then they grow into this big thing, and that's actually you moving through the worm, right? Mm-hmm. The person worm. So, are there people worms who are aware of their worm self and can shift that thing into whatever they want?
This goes back to like retrocausality. Like,
Yeah.
Somehow your consciousness is able to, like, you're getting a piece of your consciousness ahead of the worm curve.
Right. Oh, wow, you're ahead of the worm curve on that one, buddy. Yeah. So again, if we are people worms, then our past self is connected to our future self through the body of the worm.
Right.
So, yeah.
And we're leaving trails of slime behind us.
Yeah, like a planarian. The planarians are weird flatworms that can, like, they've done these studies where like a planarian worm will learn to navigate a maze, and then they can take other worms that are planarians and they can put them in, they'll have it, because at first researchers thought that somehow these worms were getting genetic information from each other by eating each other. So like one would learn to navigate a maze, right? And then they would have this other worm eat that one, and then it would be able to navigate the maze, even though it never had been put in it before. Mm-hmm. But then somebody suggested that it was actually following a trail that the other worm had left, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually the part of the story that I wanted you to listen to.
I did listen to it.
Yeah,
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah. There you go.
We're leaving trails of human worm slime that other creatures can follow.
Yeah, or you can trap them in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a cool story.
Yeah. No sleep.
Yeah. What did you think about the part where the guy just vanishes in mid-sentence?
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, that was awesome. And then she vanishes at the end, too. She's like, I'm going to go for a swim. Did you catch that?
I haven't finished it yet.
Oh, okay. Shit.
Thanks for ruining it.
Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, that's cool.
My bad.
I'm not a big spoilers person. Like, I just don't care about that.
Okay.
Like,
Well, now you'll notice it, because I didn't notice it till the third.
look, the way I look at spoiler alerts, spoilers or whatever, is if it's a good story, I like it multiple times.
Yeah.
Even after I've already been through the story. I mean,
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
if you spoil a story for me by telling me the end, then it's not a good story. You know what I mean?
Oh, I got you.
Because if I listen to it and it's spoiled for me.
You mean if I tell you the end and that spoils it, then it's not a good
Then
story?
it's not a good story
Okay, I
anyway
got you.
because it's got replayability if it's a good story.
Yeah, you said that retrocausally, and I didn't get it at first. You needed to flip it around, and then I understood it.
I'll have to go back and study that.
Yeah, if you spoil a story for me by telling me the end.
I gotcha.
No, if I tell you the end and that spoils the story.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wait. All right. So, what other strange experiences? I mean, I've had weird experiences in woods. I remember the one where we were out on a job somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and you started freaking out over the radio. You were like, dude, like, we would do this on occasion. We would say, hey, can you give me a shout? Which meant like not over the radio, shout so that we could figure out where we were.
Yeah.
So I hear Kyle, I'm up by the car or whatever. And he's all, hey, can you give me a shout or whatever? And I'm all, hey. And then he's like, shit, that's not you. And I was like, oh man, what does that mean?
Yeah. So I was hiking down on the ridge line of a hollow, a holler.
Yeah. And the old holler log?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A ravine. And I was up pretty high on it on the side where there were rock outcroppings and I was looking for caves. And my dog, Mally, was with me. She was like always badass about just like,
Staying with you.
tracking with me.
Yeah.
Like she'd be in front of me, I'd follow her, she'd follow me. We always stayed together.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember the details of what was getting me put off at first, but she started acting weird. Like there was something weird about the way she was acting.
Yeah.
And then I started to notice stuff. Like one of the clearest memories I have is I was actually crossing a small feeder gully that was going into the bigger one. And we're looking for a place to go down the steep edge of that and go up the other one. And we're on the top of the edge of that gully, and I'm looking down, and we kind of find a place to go, and Mally just like stops on the edge and is like looking, across it, and I'm looking down to try to see where we're going to be stepping or whatever, and I see her do that, and I look up, and I just see dirt and rubble falling down on because deer and stuff like will kind of make a trail, or there'll be places where it looks like you can walk and cross. And there was no fresh tracks or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the other side didn't have, a worn path to go up, but it was kind of a steep embankment, and the dirt over there was just tumbling down in this narrow line.
Oh.
Like something had just walked up that edge.
Oh yeah.
But I could see, it's forest, but I could see clearly along the plane of the side of the hill, a long distance ahead, and this dirt is just like crumbling down the hill as though something
Had just
ran up that
Yeah.
other side. I'm getting the chills like right now.
Yeah.
And she's just like staring intently off in that direction, and I'm seeing the dirt, and I'm just like, there is nothing out there.
Yeah.
Right.
There's nothing over there.
There's nothing over there, and the dirt's falling down that hill.
Yeah.
Like something just ran up that hill.
Yeah.
So I waited for a little while, and I can't remember when I radioed you or whatever, but I know that along with that was like the feeling that something was like watching us or whatever. Anyway, we keep going. And now I'm like being real careful and like real perceptive about everything. And I think at some point in there, I had radioed you, and I thought I heard bees too. That was the other thing. Like I heard this buzzing sound,
Oh my God.
And
yeah, that's classic.
I couldn't figure out where that was going. The buzzing sound like kind of faded away or whatever. And
I remember you telling me about that now. You heard a buzzing sound over your head.
And then we're shortly after that, we're coming up over like a slight little hill. And again, we're still on the side. So we're walking in a line straight ahead, but the hill is tilted down to the left. The gully is, I'm walking parallel to the ravine down to the left. But it kind of goes over a little hill, a hump, right? One of the ridges, a gradual little thing. And Mally is now maybe 20, 30 feet in front of me.
Yeah.
And we're going on this straight line, and she goes over the little thing, and it's high enough to where when she goes down the other side, only 30 feet in front of me, I can't see her.
Yeah.
And I come over the other side, or when I get to the top of it, I can see all the land in front of me, and she's just gone. Like, not there. And then I'm just like, and I called her, and just like and I never heard her run away, and I could hear her footfalls and everything, and it was just like she was just gone, and that was freaked me out. So I just like noped out of there.
Yeah.
I went straight down the hill into the open, because I knew down at the bottom of the ravine, like where I was, it was actually open field.
Yeah.
So I took off to the left at a quickened pace and got into the open field, and then walked along the wood line there, and was like calling for her. And I don't remember where I found her, but
she was way far away.
Way far away. Like when we finally reconnected, and I was just like, "What? You left me in the woods with something."
Yeah. Yeah, that was a weird piece of property. Like, one of the things that I found there that freaked me out was, so on the really steep, there'd be these, it was basically all hilltops and canyons, basically, like, or ravines. And when you got to the real steep parts of the ravines, like, so you're coming off the hilltop and you're going down, and like, you get maybe halfway down or 2/3 of the way down, and it would get real steep. Like, it was like rock and rubble and everything. And then there was lots of hogs out there, and the hogs would kind of come and root around in the dirt on the sides of the hills, and that would end up knocking trees down, because they'd root under, like, it looked like that to me anyway, that they would root under the roots of the trees and move enough of the dirt or whatever, and then wind would happen or something like that, and the trees would fall over. So there were always like all these trees uprooted. But I was going along. First of all, one of the weirdest things I found on that property was a post in the middle of nowhere. Just a single post driven into the ground in the freaking middle of the woods, where there was never a fence. And I was like, what the F is this thing? And it was not a tree. It was definitely a post. It had been cleared of bark, and it was just driven into the ground on this steep part of the hill, and there was no fence anywhere to be found. And I was like, what is this? But one of the places where trees had been knocked down all over the place, I found one tree, and I would say that it was 12 feet, or not 12 feet, 12 inches in diameter. And it was a cedar tree, so it was like one of the, what we call ash juniper, or we call cedars, but they're ash junipers here. And most of these trees grow in this bush formation. They have a big, thick trunk, or big, thick, like stump.
Sprawling.
Yeah, but then they come out in all these, like, they don't really have trunks. They just come out in all these, like, it makes a big round bush. But some of them will grow straight and tall. And so I'm down in this, down like on the side of this ravine where I'm having trouble standing. Like, in other words, like, I've got to have one foot, like, with the leg practically bent 90 degrees, and the other one's like straight, and I'm standing on the side of this hill. It's that steep. And there are all these trees that have fallen over from the hogs rooting in, the wind blowing them down. But there's this cedar trunk. It's perfectly straight, and it's like a foot in diameter, and it's broken off, like shattered, like 8 or 9 feet above the ground.
Yeah.
And I sat there like, what? How did this happen? Because, like, normally this wood is really strong. Anything that could have done that would have pushed it over, right? I was thinking, like, wind should have pulled uprooted it, and it was just like ripped apart up there, like like there were all these splinters and everything sticking out, like it had been twisted off, like up higher than I could touch. And I was just like, and then I looked down and saw the part that had broken off and fallen down, and it was still green, which meant that it just happened, like, within the past couple of days, because they turned brown pretty quickly. Quick. Yeah. So that freaked me out. And like, so that was and I never figured out what happened to that. I never did solve that mystery. It was just weird.
Dude, that same trek that I was just talking about, like early on, when I was up higher on the ridge where the rock outcroppings were, I found this one. It was like a little overhang, like a little shelter.
Yeah.
And there was this big oak tree that came up and bent over, maybe 10, 15 feet up.
Yeah.
It bent over to where it was almost horizontal.
Okay.
Right. And on the top, it was just shredded.
Holy crap.
Like just clawed up like a big cat was using it as a scratching post.
Oh, no.
And there's that little shelter right there, and you could see like all the dirt like turned up, and I was just like, no.
Kitties!
Yeah, that made me think too. Is that like any time I've been in the woods in one of those scenarios where I have either seen a predator or seen the leavings or signs of a predator, like something happens.
Yeah,
like all my senses become like heightened. You know, heart rate.
They're watching you,
and it's like there's no other feeling to me than
that's right.
Like when you realize you are in the vicinity or in the lair or in wherever, you know, like there's some predator nearby. It's just like all your hairs like stand on end, and you're just like, okay. And it's like the sound of everything gets like you just It's like these base instincts start like coming into play, you know.
And it may be I've always attributed it to being stared at. That's how I think of it. That may not be right, but like I know that,
but there is similar.
And I know that military training tells scouts not to stare. Like if you're like standing outside of a fort and you're like scouting and you're hiding and there's like lookouts, they tell them don't stare at those guys because they'll get this feeling that there's somebody out there, right? That they're being watched and a big cat has these giant yellow eyes and it's like you just know that it's watching you. It's like and like I get that same like hair raising sort of tingling feeling but when you hear buzzing, that's something else.
Yeah.
That's high strangeness. That's when the Oz factor starts in and you just need to nope. Like
I've definitely walked up on a cat one time, and it was a big one. I thought it was a deer. Yeah. Until it scaled a sheer cliff. Like it went straight up that cliff.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Yeah, the smoke cat. That's right. What are we calling it?
No, that wasn't. I was with Jason. Like we were hiking back from
smoke snake.
Smoke snake. Yeah. We were hiking back from. We delivered a machine up to the top of this hill, and we were coming back, and it was
you
like
guys saw a cat
right at dusk, and then this thing just comes out of the river, right up onto the plain where we were walking on the road, and like it was just beeline for this cliff, but it was kind of colored the same as a deer. Like a whitetail. Yeah. But it actually had a long tail. I was like, oh, that has a long tail. And then it went, just climbed straight up this like 40-foot cliff. Yeah. I was like, that was a cat. Yeah. And he was like, you know what you do when you find a cat in the woods, right? You run as fast as you can. False. And I was like, no. He's like, because I can run faster than you.
That's right. The non-survival of the least fit. All you have to do is be faster than the slowest guy. Yeah. The reason I was saying smoke snake is because that was the same spot where you guys saw the cat go up the cliff, where I saw something out of the corner of my eye in the darkness when I was driving. Yeah. And I called it a smoke snake because it was just a shadow that went up. Smoke snake. Yeah, I was like, it was a snake made of smoke, bro. It just went and flowed up that cliff. And then you told me the cat story. And I was like, okay, that's probably what it was. Yeah. Smoke snake. The other thing, that I remember, this was a different property. I climbed to the top of this hill that, but like it was the place out there where she wanted us to make the trail up there, right? You know what I'm talking about? She wanted the trail up there, right? So I climbed to the top of this hill, and I was kind of exploring the hilltop, and like the idea that we had been given is that like this hilltop is very inaccessible, and it was until we made the trail up there. Yeah. Now I'm sure people had been up there before, but they had owned this property since the beginning of people owning property out there, and it's like very few people had been up there. So I went up there, and one of the first things I found was this enormous nest. Do you remember this? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I could have laid down in it like without curling up. And it was on the ground, and basically something had taken soft grasses, like if you pick through the grass and you get down to the bottom of where the grass is growing, you can get these very fine grasses. Yeah. Something had taken a ton of that stuff and then made this enormous circular bed. Okay, that looked like a giant bird's nest. It was huge, though. It was like, big enough across for me to lay down in straight, like laying straight without curling up. It was huge. The other thing that I found on the other side of that hill, so I found that, and I was like, okay, this is pretty weird. On the other side of that hill, on the side with the nests, it was all cedars, and it was almost impassable. But once you got through all that to the other side of the hill, because the hill was kind of long, got to the other side of the hill where it had a steep cliff that just dropped off almost straight down to some flat open plains where there was like a river. It kind of opened up. The undergrowth went away, and it opened up, and it just had oak trees, and it was a lot more open. Yeah. And like at this point, I was up there with the woman who had owned the property. We climbed up we were showing her the trail, and her and I went up there, and I was like, yeah. So we come over here, and it's really beautiful, and there's this cliff edge. We come under this group of oak trees, and we're struck by this incredibly strong smell that I have no idea what it was. I was unable to identify. It didn't stink. It smelled very strange, but it was very powerful. And we both were like, holy crap, what is that smell? And she was like, is it one of the trees? So we're like walking around. I'm like sniffing foliage, trying to figure out what the hell it is. And it wasn't any of the flowers. And I've never smelled anything like it before or since. And then I told her about the nest, and she was like, okay, we need to get off this hill right now. And I was like, why? You think you think it's samsquanch? And she was like, don't even talk about that. She said she used to have nightmares about samsquanch when she was a little girl on that same property. And I was like, okay, we need to get off this hill right fucking now. Because like Sasquatch sightings are associated with powerful smells. Now, usually it's a horrible smell, but I was thinking if it was a female, because the horrible smells usually and then the person encounters like a giant male, but maybe the females smell good. I don't know. I have no idea. All I know is that the smell was not gag inducing or whatever. It wasn't necessarily where you smell it and you're like, oh, that's beautiful, flowers, blah, blah. It wasn't that. It was strange, strong, but not gross. And it was, I have no idea what it was to this day. And then when we went back up there later, there was no smell.
Yeah, so it
I never
wasn't foliage.
Right. And probably whatever it was there just before we got there and left.
Or it was just nearby.
Right. Now I didn't
really. It was probably like that tree that you were leaning on to smell that plant. That was it.
Yeah.
And after you left, it ran away. Right.
It was the rock that eats people. I've been thinking about that story a lot, about the native legends of boulders that eat people. And like I watched some videos about grouper fish just because I was thinking about that. And like it reminded me of the stuff about the octopus. Like you know, like there's the like people think this idea of a shapeshifter or the idea of a shapeshifter or something that has like an innate camouflage is ridiculous, but it's not.
Dude, look up cuttlefish videos. Oh my god. It's
and they're incredibly intelligent. And I think that this is what's interesting about grouper fish. People are like, well, you know, those look like boulders, yet we know about them, right? And I'm like, yeah, but that's because when we're in the ocean, we're not in our environment. We're kind of outside of it. They don't know what we are. And we're able to sort of, just like the dimensions, you're able to kind of look down on this. Yeah. And everything is strange to you. So you can kind of see things that you're like, that I think that's a fish. But other fish have no idea. They swim right next to it and then, right, it swallows them, right? We would be the same thing if there was something like that on land. We'd never notice because it's imitating. It's designed and it's imitating something that is in our world that we would just don't even notice, right? You walk past this boulder and then like when you get around to the other side of it, it's like.
But dude, the cuttlefish videos, like there's one video that I always show people if the subject comes up.
Yeah.
And the diver is swimming towards this rock.
Yeah, that's the one.
I mean, you know, you're like, okay, we're gonna. Where's the cuttlefish? And the rock just suddenly like, whoa, like morphs into this freaking white, like light blue and it just tears off and like inks him, you know?
Yeah. And what always amazed me about that video is the response that the thing has. You watch it, the dude's swimming towards this boulder that looks like it's got seaweed and everything on it or whatever. And then when he gets close, suddenly woof, part of the boulder turns into this octopus.
Yeah.
Right? But it doesn't take off. It's looking at him. You can't even see the eye until it changes. Suddenly you can see its body and it watches the diver. It shifts very quickly into this white color. It's like woof. And it watches. And when the diver doesn't burn off, it burns off.
Yeah.
And that told me, I'm like, okay, you're walking through the woods and there's a rabbit hiding nearby. You have no idea there's a rabbit there until it suddenly burns off because you've scared it, right?
Yeah.
It breaks cover and runs because you've set off its fear, like fight or flight, and it runs. And you had no idea it was there until it runs, right?
Yeah.
So it actually gives itself away by running. What this thing did was not that.
Yeah.
It tried to scare the person by leaving its camouflage, and then watched to see if it would scare the guy. And when it didn't, then it took off. That I thought was an intelligent, like, what do you call it? Like an abstract concept response. It had this abstract concept of like, I'll scare him by changing into an octopus. And when that didn't work, it was like, all right, I'm leaving, you know?
Yeah.
And then when the guy followed it, it was running and inking and everything. And when the guy kept following it, it stopped running and spread out on the ground and then turned into what looked like a very poisonous underwater snake. Did you see that? Like if you watch the video, it like spreads out on the ground and then gets all these stripes and turns into what is a very poisonous, very dangerous sea snake. So
Dude,
it like
those things are freaking awesome,
yeah,
man.
and it's like, and then they do this thing where they reverse it very slowly, where you get to watch the octopus reattach itself to the rock and then change back into the boulder.
Yeah,
and it is wild. Like it extrudes little fronds from its skin to make it look like freaking seaweed, and you're just like, oh my god! Not only can it change its color, but it can extrude, it can change the texture of its skin and stuff. It is wild. So like, I have no problem believing that there are things out there in the woods that have lived alongside of us, and we've never known about them, except like some native cultures have figured it out because they live in the woods or whatever. But how would you ever find out if a boulder was something that ate people, if it was intelligent enough to not reveal itself when anybody else was going to see it?
Right.
You know, somebody just walked down that trail and never came back.
Yeah.
You know, and then the thing like spits out a tooth. That's all they find is one tooth on the trail that everybody's been using to search for that person. You know, it's like, it's freaking weird.
Yep. And they're still discovering new life forms and stuff in the Amazon. And
Yeah.
it's like Manual for the Universe, Final Edition is still being updated as to what lives here on our planet.
Right. That's right. Cryptids are just future entries in the biological manual, part of the manual. Yeah. Now, I don't know. What do you think of the Bigfoot stuff? What do you think of all that?
I don't know. I think that basically what you were just saying, that we, there could be these things that, depending on their intelligence level, we may not, and whatever their camouflage abilities are, and their population. Obviously, there's a lot of variables, but
yeah. I always, like with this stuff, I always fall on the whole, like, I tend to believe the ancient legends and the lore of native cultures.
Yeah.
And they all say that they're not animals. They treat them as tribes and that they totally exist and they want to have nothing to do with, for the most part, with mankind. Yeah. Same thing with pygmies. Like, there are pygmy races out there that they say that, like,
it's interesting that the red-headed giants.
Yeah.
And all the Native American tales. And then you're like Bigfoot, supposedly this real hairy redheaded, kind of Harry and the Hendersons guy.
Yeah. I mean, and it's got a long head.
And it's like, okay, so if Bigfoot was like hairy all over the place and he lived in the forest, chances are that hair is pelts.
Yeah.
And if he is camouflaging himself or he has red hair, it's like,
I got you. I see what you're saying. That it's a giant and he's wearing pelts. He's wearing animals' skins or whatever. And
so it's like, oh my God, I saw this like hairy, completely hairy thing. Well, yeah, he was wearing fur.
Yeah. You saw a giant in a butt flap, bro.
Maybe they're cold-blooded. Like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. The other interesting thing is, like, this is more recent. I don't know what to think of this yet, but people go Bigfoot hunting with, or even just go out into the woods at night with infrared, with night vision goggles, right? And people have seen, like, so when you're wearing these goggles and they're infrared, not night vision, but actual infrared, right? They'll see flashes, and you can do this with the sky. Like, you can look on YouTube and see videos of people just looking at the sky with infrared video, and there's just all kinds of stuff flying around, and you can't tell, are they bats? Is it are they, who knows what they are? Stuff you can't see optically or visually, with your regular eyes, but they're all over the place in the night sky. But the videos of people walking through the woods, you can see the animals out there. You can see, like, stuff running around.
Yeah.
But then there are these, like, anomalous flashes, right? And the flashes are like two circles, and they both flash at the same time. So you'll see this, like, these two circles just kind of like blink, 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 blink. And like one military guy who was doing this, he was like, I know what that is. That's something opening its eyes.
Yeah, because the
eyelids, the eyelids
thermals
are, the
will see
eyelids
a
are
reflection.
cooler than the eyeballs, right? So if their eyes are closed, then it's cooler or whatever. But then if it opens its eyes, it's a brighter color. And
I was thinking that because thermal, like glass and stuff, will reflect.
Yeah.
Right. So like a piece of glass or whatever looks like a mirror.
Yes.
In the thermal.
That's true. Yeah.
So if it's something looking at you and it opens its eyes, maybe you're actually seeing an image of yourself. Oh, yeah. You're seeing your infrared light reflecting off of whatever the lensing of their eyeballs.
Oh yeah, that could be
if their eyeballs reflect infrared.
Yeah. Well, I think that the idea that this guy eventually got, and I don't know how much to believe this or whatever, but he eventually was like he eventually was going out there to track what he thought was people living in the woods. Because he kept seeing human forms moving around, and he was in infrared, so he didn't know what it was. It just like you see this humanoid form moving around in the woods, and he was like they're very silent and and it was weirding him out or whatever. But he eventually he was setting up these hidden stands, right? So he'd be way up in the trees, and he would be there all day, and then wait for the night to fall, and then eventually he saw a group of them, like 4 or 5, standing in a circle, and now he's using infrared so that they're bright because they're warm. Right. But their eye areas, he said, were flashing. They were standing there, and he was like, it was completely silent. But they were standing around like a bunch of dudes talking to each other in a circle, but their eyes were all flashing.
Yeah.
And he was like, they're talking to each other somehow. Like they have this silent communication where they can make their eyes pulse with heat. Like they could see heat.
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
So
that makes me wonder about snakes, dude.
Yeah.
Like snakes can see infrared.
Yeah.
Right. So like
they totally can see Bigfoot.
In the pitch black of night, they're crawling around, and when you walk up, you just look like this glowing light bulb.
Yeah. Like a giant glowing god.
Yeah. And there's like some little mouse or something that they're hunting, and they can just like the mouse comes out and they just see this light bulb like walking around, and they're just like,
right.
I'm gonna get a little bit closer.
Yeah. And they are completely hidden to infrared because they're cold-blooded. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking of too. Like anything that's cold-blooded is basically invisible to infrared because they are the same temperature as the background.
That's what I was saying. Like maybe Bigfoot's cold-blooded, bro.
Yeah.
That's why he wears furs.
He's cold.
But seriously, if you were an intelligent being and cold-blooded, then even, at night, you would want to like bundle up so that you keep your system
your
as warm as you can for a while.
Yeah. And they're using ancient mammoth fur.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Who knows? Like there's also the Yeti. Like that guy can't be cold-blooded because he lives in the Himalayas.
Yeah. But his fur's so thick, you can't see him with the
It's actually a really skinny dude. It's just a lot of furs. Yeah. All right, I think that's about it for episode 59 of Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Strange stories in the woods.
That's right. All right, I want to thank Kyle for all the production, Kyle and Ty for all the music, Brett, the Watcher, for keeping us on the straight and narrow in terms of the truth. I want to thank Brenner for the Sands of Time and the monitor that we couldn't use this time. It's still badass, sitting there awesome. It's awesome. Just off. And Laura for all the intros. And also want to remind you guys, any comments or emails that you send that we think are badass, we will read on the show. I've noticed the people that have been sending us emails and comments have stopped doing that after we read them on the show. So don't be shy. If you send more, we'll read them again. Also, any kind of reviews you guys can give us anywhere where you can give reviews would be great. Some people have been doing that, and that's really helped out. Thank you guys a lot, and keep doing it because it helps a lot. It's getting the listenership up. We are a growing podcast. It's awesome, and it's all thanks to you guys. So you're the last ones I want to thank. Last but not least.
Thanks a lot.
That's right. We love you guys, and just remember, they're out there somewhere under the Mars ice cap. Aliens. That's what I'm talking about.
Snakes.